LETTER V. Of the Backwoods of Canada, by Catharine Parr Traill. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Backwoods of Canada, by Catharine Parr Traill. Letter V. Journey from Cobourg to Amherst, Peterborough, Newcastle District, September 8th, 1832. We left Cobourg on the afternoon of the 1st of September, in a light wagon, comfortably lined with buffalo robes. Our fellow travellers consisted of 3 gentlemen and a young lady, all of whom proved very agreeable, and willing to afford us every information respecting the country through which we are travelling. The afternoon was fine, one of those rich mellow days we often experience in the early part of September. The warm hues of autumn were already visible on the forest trees, but rather spoke of ripeness than decay. The country round Cobourg is well cultivated, a great portion of the woods having been superseded by open fields, pleasant farms, and fine flourishing orchards, with green pastures, where abundance of cattle were grazing. The county jail and court house at Amherst, about a mile and a half from Cobourg, is a fine stone edifice, situated on a rising ground, which commands an extensive view over the Lake Ontario and surrounding scenery. As you advance further up the country in the direction of Hamilton or Rice Lake plains, the land rises into bold sweeping hills and dales. The outline of the country reminded me of the hilly part of Gloucestershire. You want, however, the charm with which civilization has so eminently adorned that fine country, with all its romantic villages, flourishing towns, cultivated farms, and extensive downs, so thickly covered with flocks and herds. Here the bold forests of oak, beech, maple, and basswood, with now and then a grove of dark pine, cover the hills, only enlivened by an occasional settlement, with its log house and zigzag fences of split timber. These fences are very offensive to my eye. I look in vain for the rich hedgerows of my native country. Even the stone fences in the north and west of England, cold and bare as they are less unsightly. The settlers, however, invariably adopt whatever plan saves time, labour, and money. The great law of expediency is strictly observed. It is born of necessity. Matters of taste appear to be little regarded, or are, at all events, after considerations. I could see a smile hover on the lips of my fellow travellers on hearing of our projected plans for the adornment of our future dwelling. "If you go into the Backwoods, your house must necessarily be a log house," said an elderly gentleman who had been a settler many years in the country, "for you will most probably be out of the way of a saw mill, and you will find so much to do, and so many obstacles to encounter, for the first 2 or 3 years, that you will hardly have opportunity for carrying these improvements into effect. There is an old saying," he added, with a mixture of gravity and good humour in his looks, "that I used to hear when I was a boy, 'First creep, then go.' Note. Derived from infants crawling on all fours before they have strength to walk. Matters are not carried on quite so easily here as at home, and the truth of this a very few weeks' acquaintance with the bush, as we term all unbroken forest land, will prove. At the end of 5 years you may begin to talk of these pretty improvements and elegancies, and you will then be able to see a little what you are about." "I thought," said I, "everything in this country was done with so much expedition. I am sure I have heard and read of houses being built in a day." The old gentleman laughed. "Yes, yes," he replied, "travellers find no difficulty in putting up a house in 12 or 24 hours, and so the log walls can be raised in that time or even less; but the house is not completed when the outer walls are up, as your husband will find to his cost." "But all the works on emigration that I leave read," replied I, "give a fair and flattering picture of a settler's life; for, according to their statements, the difficulties are easily removed." "Never mind books," said my companion; "use your own reason. Look on those interminable forests, through which the eye can only penetrate a few yards, and tell me how those vast timbers are to be removed, utterly extirpated, I may say, from the face of the earth, the ground cleared and burnt, a crop sown and fenced, and a house to shelter you raised without difficulty, without expense, and without great labour. Never tell me of what is said in books, written very frequently by tarry at home travellers. Give me facts. One honest, candid emigrant's experience is worth all that has been written on the subject. Besides, that which may be a true picture of one part of the country will hardly suit another. The advantages and disadvantages arising from soil, situation, and progress of civilization are very different in different districts. Even the prices of goods, and of produce, stock, and labour, vary exceedingly, according as you are near to, or distant from, towns and markets." I began to think my fellow traveller spoke sensibly on the subject, with which the experience of 13 years had made him perfectly conversant. I began to apprehend that we had also taken too flattering a view of a settler's life, as it must be in the backwoods. Time and our own personal knowledge will be the surest test, and to that we must bow. We are ever prone to believe that which we wish. About half way between Cobourg and Rice Lake there is a pretty valley between two steep hills. Here there is a good deal of cleared land and a tavern. The place is called Cold Springs. Who knows but some century or two hence this spot may become a fashionable place of resort to drink the waters. A Canadian Bath or Cheltenham may spring up where now nature revels in her wilderness of forest trees. We now ascend the plains, a fine elevation of land, for many miles scantily clothed with oaks, and here and there bushy pines, with other trees and shrubs. The soil is in some places sandy, but varies, I am told, considerably in different parts, and is covered in large tracts with rich herbage, affording abundance of the finest pasture for cattle. A number of exquisite flowers and shrubs adorn these plains, which rival any garden in beauty during the spring and summer months. Many of these plants are peculiar to the plains, and are rarely met with in any other situation. The trees, too, though inferior in size to those in the forest, are more picturesque, growing in groups or singly, at considerable intervals, giving a sort of park like appearance to this portion of the country. The prevailing opinion seems to be, that the plains laid out in grazing or dairy farms would answer the purpose of settlers as well, as there is plenty of land that will grow wheat and other corn crops, and can be improved at a small expense, besides abundance of natural pasture for cattle. One great advantage seems to be, that the plough can be introduced directly, and the labour of preparing the ground is necessarily much less than where it is wholly covered with wood. There are several settlers on these plains, possessing considerable farms. The situation, I should think, must be healthy and agreeable, from the elevation and dryness of the land, and the pleasant prospect they command of the country below them, especially where the Rice Lake, with its various islands and picturesque shores, is visible. The ground itself is pleasingly broken into hill and valley, sometimes gently sloping, at other times abrupt and almost precipitous. An American farmer, who formed one of our party at breakfast the following morning, told me that these plains were formerly famous hunting grounds of the Indians, who, to prevent the growth of timbers, burned them year after year. This, in process of time, destroyed the young trees, so as to prevent them again from accumulating to the extent they formerly did. Sufficient only was left to form coverts for the deer resort hither in great herds for the sake of a peculiar tall sort of grass with which these plains abound, called deer grass, on which they become exceedingly fat at certain seasons of the year. Evening closed in before we reached.